Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I hope you're all doing great today. So it's pretty warm here. I'm actually wearing shorts. Oh my God, my white legs are crazy, but hopefully the weather's reasonable where you're at and you're having a good day. So, and then I just got something in my eye. That's terrible. Okay, I'm better. So anyway, today we are gonna make, I was inspired by watermelon. I've been kind of playing around. I wasn't super thrilled with the pink that we made, so I was just kind of playing around with pinks. And I was making more, like the redder pinks. And I was like, wow, this kind of like looks like watermelon. So I Google searched and was like, is that like a color name? And that is totally a color name. And it was exactly what I found on the internet. So I was like, oh, watermelon, that's kind of cool. So that inspired me to make a different kind of green. To go with that and kind of think about what was going on. And so I've come up with a little bit of a game plan for these. Like I said, we got two colors and I'll show them to you. You might have seen the thumbnail. So I'll show you the little samples. You can kind of get a look at these colors, but they're both kind of on the possible added to the, I still haven't settled for sure on the burgundy and navy blue as the other two that I'm going to bring out first. So I just thought, let's try a few different colors and we'll see what happens kind of thing. So if you didn't notice, there's a poll going on. You might want to wait, or you may end up changing your mind after you've seen the colors and kind of compared. But the poll is, what are your favorite colors? And so I'm just going to kind of base it. I don't think there's a way where you can say like, what are your two favorites? The poll system on this is pretty simple. So, whatever the two top ones are, that'll factor into my considerations on what I end up going with. But we're getting pretty close to the point where like I need to decide what colors we're going with because I got to order the labels. But things are moving along. I know I've been saying this, like the new colors are coming someday, but there's just so much that you need to kind of think about with all this stuff coming out with a new product. And like I said, I don't have any experience bottling products. So it's been a learning curve. It's been interesting though. But at this point, I'm just about ready to start bottling stuff also, which is very exciting. I'm a little bit, I want to make sure that I do that right and come up with a good, way of doing it kind of thing. But should be pretty good. And so just to let you guys know off the bat, where you're going to find these pigments is going to be Turner's Warehouse and my website. And I plan to hopefully expand. This is a product that I don't have a problem wholesaling. I want to try to get it to, as many people as possible kind of thing. So, we'll have to kind of see how that goes. But like I said, off the bat, Turner's Warehouse will have them right away, and I will too, of course. So, pretty fun stuff. So let's switch over to the overhead view real quick. And so here are the new colors. So this is the watermelon. Hopefully the color is coming through. I don't know. This, the one that we did before was a little bit, I don't know. Pink always just kind of looks Pepto to me, but I kind of like this. It's like a hot pink kind of thing. A little bit duller than like super hot pink, but I was kind of looking at pictures and this pretty closely matched some of the, like online there's different color website things. And this was pretty close to what a lot of people were considering like a watermelon pink. And then this is what I'm calling Kelly green, just a bright green, which is another color that, I don't know, there's not a lot of places that I see that have a decent green. I don't know. Eye Candy may have something in their pigment paste stuff. I got to be honest, I tried that stuff and they come in jars. It's super thick. I didn't love it. And I'm not really bagging on them because I'm coming out with pigments. It wasn't my favorite thing. And then the other thing that I want to mention about these pigments, I'm a little bit on the fence right now on these caps. I've had a couple where the pigment ended up kind of like seeping through the back of this thing. So it was like kind of a mess. So I've already ordered some of the twist caps, and I'm gonna play around with these and see if that was just a one-off deal or if I'm gonna have to like switch gears, because what I don't want is the cap to be a complete pain in the butt for everybody. I don't love the twisty cap things either. They have their issues, but anyway, so that's just something that I will have to see. I don't know. I'm not 100% certain on that yet. But so those are the colors. And then just for reference, here's the colors. Now, one thing that I did also, I went back and slightly tweaked the burgundy and the navy to make them just a little bit more, what is the word I'm trying to think of? Well, brighter kind of. What is the word that I'm thinking of? Saturated. I felt like both of the navy and the burgundy were a little bit duller looking, the ones that we made on the pens. They were fine, there was nothing wrong with them, but I was kind of looking at them and I thought, I think that I can actually improve these a little bit. So I did. So I like these, they're just a little bit more vibrant. I mean, they're still gonna be like dark colors, you know, but those are the two. And then, I don't know if I can rearrange this stuff, maybe zoom in. So here are the 4 options for that pole, and I'm going to zoom in to those. So let me know if you know which are your favorites, you know, kind of maybe like rank them, or I guess I don't know how it's going to be. I guess the way this poll is going to work, you're going to have to like pick the best one, I guess. But we'll have to kind of see. Like I wish there was a poll where you could choose like rank them. But I don't think that there was any way to do that on this poll. So we'll just kind of look at that. Like I said, I'm not going to choose based on this poll or anything like that, but those are the colors that we got going on here that I'm thinking about. And again, I think that navy blue is just a very valuable color to have, to be pre-mixed. You just dump it out of the thing. You can make your own and do all that stuff, but it does require having to mix colors and mess around with stuff. And you're going to have more than just one pigment on hand to do that. So that is the drawback. Personally, I'm the type that I like to have control and make whatever color I want, obviously, but I think this is a pretty decent navy blue. So that's kind of high on my list is something that I want to bring out. Burgundy was just kind of a fun one. You don't really see a lot of that. So that one's kind of cool. And then, like I said, the watermelon just kind of sparked my interest when I kind of created this sample. I was like, ooh, I like that. That's not too bad. And then the Kelly green, like I said, that just kind of went with the watermelon. So that's on the table. Another color that is kind of possible is the tractor green. It's a little bit more yellow than this one. So that's kind of on the table. I think that might be like a second round type of thing though. And I want to have variety. I don't want to have like 50 shades of green. I already have an army green. That's why I'm a little bit more reluctant to come out with another green shade. But, you know, if everybody really likes it, then we'll have to see. So that's what we got going on. We got a little bit of watermelon. So I want to discuss the watermelon idea that I have though. So obviously these two colors, watermelon, right? But I was looking at pictures of watermelon, just like real watermelon on the internet. And the other thing that you see, I think what I'm kind of, in my head, what I'm going for is kind of like the slice of, where you see like a slice, you see like the pinkish red, and then you got the green rind, but there's also kind of like a white part of the rind, right? And I was looking at that and like, you could come up with some kind of like off-white weird pigment, dull white or something, but what I thought was this is like perfect for like interference green, because it is kind of a greenish color, that white. It's kind of a weird one. And I think that interference green, I mean, that's like almost perfect. So what I'm going to do for this batch, or for these blanks, what I thought of was, we'll mix these separately, the green and then the interference green. And I think what I'm going to try to do, part of this, this isn't going to be a blank where it's like red, green, and then, or like interference and then like rind green. That becomes difficult. You can do that a little bit easier if you're pouring like horizontally. There's ways that you can kind of separate things out a little bit easier. You can pour, the dark green first, try to pour the interference on top of it, and then try to pour the pink. But what I find is they end up kind of syncing together, especially if you've got a lot of white, which is the case in this pink. White is really heavy. It doesn't really matter what brand it is. White is just a heavy color. So it's going to sink anyway, and it ends up kind of swirling around. So you don't really get excellent deviations like that. It's not gonna, so I didn't want to chase that. So what I thought of was, why don't we mix these two separate and then do a dirty pour, pouring them together. And I thought, you know, even if these don't really look like watermelon exactly, I think that might be kind of an interesting look. You know, bare minimum, it may not be like, oh yeah, that's totally watermelon, but I think it's going to make it kind of an interesting, you know, look to the blank, whether it looks exactly like watermelon or not. So it's kind of that's an easy way to kind of get out of like, it's not perfect, but it looks good kind of thing, you know? So let's see, I'm going to go back up to the top. Looks like you guys really like the burgundy. That's nice. Let's see, I can't see below. I don't know who was here first. The poll thing is kind of covering it, but it looks like we got Jennifer and we got Bruce and Paul's here and Vinny. And let's see, and Jennifer was giving me stuff about being late. I was only like 1 minute late when you said that. I thought I was actually on time. I was looking at my watch and then, you know, last minute things always. And we got Darren's here, Mark L's in the house, and David Bingham's here, nice. 20-mile-an-hour winds and warm, ugh, that's the worst. I remember the first time that I went down to Vegas, this was just like a trip. I was visiting someone, and I'd never been to like a true desert. Like, you know, I'm up in northern Nevada and it's like high desert. So it's, you know, we got obviously Tahoe's right like in my backyard. So it's cooler temperatures generally. It does get warm in the summer, but I mean, it's not like Vegas, you know, Phoenix. And I remember the first time I was in Vegas and I was with a buddy and we're driving down the freeway at like 9 o'clock at night or something like that, and we got the windows down and it's just like a blast furnace coming in the window, and I'd never experienced that kind of thing in my life, where it's like dark and it's just like hot fan, like you literally had the heater on in the car, and I was like, oh my god, it's terrible here. So I that's not very fun. David's got 97 outside. Ugh, yeah, that's warmer than us. It's actually kind of crazy. Usually we have some, like, I don't know, I guess it's still kind of early May. But it's about 80 degrees, which is starting to get kind of, it feels warm to us, you know, but next week it's supposed to drop down to like the 50s again or something. So I don't know. It can stay cold as long as it wants for me. Because the problem that I have is we don't have my shop isn't air conditioned. So even right now, you know, when it's 80 degrees outside in the afternoon, the shop starts getting up to about 75. And that's enough to really kind of throw off pouring and timing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, realistically, 3 degrees really kind of makes a difference to like when I pour and how things turn out. So I don't love it when it gets hot. It's my least favorite. I like the weather. I like doing things outside, but I don't like it in the shop. I just need an air conditioner. Let's see, Mike McEwen's here, setting up a project on the lathe. Well, that's a good reason to be late. I'm all right with that. And let's see, Kev's here. And Brian over at TBC Bushings is here. Nice. 96 in Vegas. Not too bad. Could be worse. Not awesome, but so it looks like we got the whole crew. Maybe a few people missing. So one other thing that I wanted to mention is we're gonna bust out. Let's zoom out. How about that? We're gonna bust out the beast on these guys. Now, again, with the temperatures warming, that's not gonna make things any easier, but I don't think it's gonna be a big deal, especially we're only really gonna be pouring 2 colors technically, because we're gonna dirty pour the 2 greens. So we should be able to get them in, you know, poured pretty well. Again, if you have the dexterity, if you start running into temperature issues and your resin's kind of heating up faster, and another reason is, you know, now we're going to be pouring 12 blanks. That's a lot more, you know, that's twice as many as 6, right? Obviously, you know, doing some math. But the problem that I have is usually the way that I typically do things, because I have no dexterity to be able to pour the amounts that I want with 2 hands at the same time. It's very difficult. It would take me a lot of practicing. I mean, probably thousands of blanks to get good at that. So if you're pouring, you know, one thing at a time, and especially if you're only pouring small amounts on every pass, the more blanks that you're pouring at once, the harder that is, especially if you want to come back at the end and stir them up, each one, right? So all of these things take time. So like I said, if you got the dexterity, if you want to shave some minutes off of the pouring time, doing it 2-cup method is going to get you through pouring them faster. You're still not going to be able to, stir faster, but just things to think about, right? So it'll be kind of fun to do the beast. So we're only going to do 1 pour today. I actually have a lot of, I told you I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start bottling stuff. And so I need to kind of set aside some time this weekend. Tomorrow's Mother's Day, so that's another day out of the shop. So I'm trying to, take advantage of today. So we'll do 1 pour with these guys on the beast. And then I'll have a little bit of extra time to kind of sit down and figure out this bottling stuff. So kind of crazy stuff, the whole bottling thing. I will say, like getting into this stuff, I really, I got to hand it to Braxton Frankenberry and the family over there at Divine Pigments, because, they went through this whole process and it ain't easy. There's a lot of little minor details and stupid stuff that go into this whole, if you're going to sell a product in a, bottle, there's a lot to it. I think of like the people that are doing like home brew and wine and honey, and there's a lot to it. So if you're thinking about getting into something like that, be prepared. There's a lot of stuff that you need to kind of learn about. So pretty fun. All right, so let's see here. We got any other? Zach's been practicing his math. I know. I've been thinking about it. All right, so let's get things rolling here. Where are we at on the, so we're still at, so again, if you're just joining the fun, the poll is asking, unfortunately, what I would like is for people to rank in order. I don't think I have that kind of control over the poll on YouTube. But I guess just pick your favorite, color out of these 4. We got the burgundy, the navy, we got the pink, the watermelon, and we got the Kelly green. I'm just trying to kind of figure out what the final 2 colors are going to be on the initial launch of the pigments, the liquid pigments. Oh, and by the way, the name of the pigments, like the line, this isn't going to be like a new company necessarily or anything like that. It's going to be under the ResinWorks Studio umbrella, let's say, I guess, or whatever. But the name of the pigment line is going to be called Color Lab. I was inspired, I already have that little beaker guy as my logo for ResinWorks Studio. And I think of myself, I'm always kind of, mad scientist in the lab doing stuff, and especially with these pigments, it's been kind of crazy. So I thought Color Lab, that's kind of cool. It's easy to remember. So just to let you know, Color Lab is going to be what we're calling it, and it should be fun. All right, so let's switch to this view. First things first, we'll get this thing out of the way. I'm going to go for just a straight stick for the stir on this. And there's a couple reasons. The main reason is what I was talking about. When you've got more blanks to deal with, the stirring thing, for me to go in with my normal stir stick, go in and be spinning this and doing all this stuff, this takes a significant amount of time to do all that spinning and doing this 12 times. What that's going to force me to do is pour much earlier, at a lower temperature, which can increase the color bleed and all that kind of stuff. I'm just worried about it. By the time I'm getting to this, these last few rows, it's going to be thick. And I've already noticed with the warmer temperatures in the shop, I've been pouring some blanks. And I'll tell you what, that stuff at my kind of normal temperatures, I'm wiping it off and it's like hot on my fingertips. It's still liquid, there was no problems, but it starts getting pretty hot. So I'm just gonna go with this straight one because it's easier just to kind of go in there and, it's like a quicker method to just kind of stir it up. Now, you're not gonna get probably as much stirring going on necessarily, but I don't really think it matters on these blanks. I think they're gonna look good either way. So just to let you know what that deal is, I need one more cup for the interference green. And you know, ghost green, if you're an eye candy purchaser, same thing. I ended up buying a lot of Pearl-Ex back in the day, and it's a little bit different than the eye candy, and I was making blanks with Pearl-Ex, before eye candy even came out, became a business or whatever, or that at least I knew of. And so I know what to expect with this stuff, but there's really pretty much not really any difference between them. And I'm also going to try out, I already did the calculations on like how much. On this interference green, I'm going to start out with a ½ teaspoon and see how I feel about it, kind of see what it looks like in the cup. I don't really want it to be too see-through. A lot of times your interference colors can be fairly see-through. But I don't want it, you know, like totally see-through. I don't want it, you know, too see-through, and I don't want it totally opaque necessarily. So I want to kind of get an idea, looking in the cup, how I feel about it. And so probably, though, I'm not going to be going over a teaspoon. I kind of know my ranges. I'm hoping that this ½ teaspoon looks like what I want, though. All right, so, and then in my little notebook, just to let you guys know, I don't know if you can really see it. I just knocked over everything. So what I've put in here is I just got like the date, the name of what's going on, what mold, resin, how much, a couple little notes about how I'm pouring it, and like the stir stick I'm using, and then I got my amounts broken out, which cup I'm actually using. That's another one that I didn't usually do in the beginning with my notes, but in some cases, it kind of helps to know what cup, in certain cases. Some pigments, for instance, what I notice is a lot of times reds tend to heat up the resin faster. You could have the same exact cup, same amount of resin, and same amount of, you know, or whatever, it doesn't, not same amount of pigment, but like red versus green. And I guarantee you this watermelon is most likely going to heat up faster than the green. And so one thing that you can do to slightly combat that is you could try putting the green in like a smaller cup. That might kind of change things around a little bit. But you may notice that certain, you know, even mica powders, excuse me, certain mica powders compared to other ones, it may heat up your resin a little bit differently. Now that's not necessarily a problem, but if what you're kind of going for is like all of them kind of heating up at the same rate, you may need to employ different ways of making things kind of even out. And when I said like put the green in a smaller cup, you're kind of compacting the resin, right? Like if I put the green in a really big cup, it's only going to fill up a very short amount if it's like the same amount of, you know, resin, but it's spread out further. So that's going to heat up slower than if you compact the same amount of resin into kind of a smaller, you know, chunk kind of thing. So you can choose the cup that you're using even to try to manipulate that temperature, you know, rapidity. And it, like, you know, and if you're going for something that one of them's like super thin when you're pouring it compared to the others, then you can put, you know, leave it in the big cup if you want. There's different ways of kind of dealing with these scenarios. So anyway, and I put, you know, how much, which pigments or whatever that I put in there, how much, and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what I got in my notebook if anybody was curious. And we're just going to basically split these into 3 even amounts. But then, like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump the 2 greens together. I'm going to wait until, you know, not the temperature that I want to pour at necessarily, but right before that, I'm going to dump them together so that they kind of do retain that, you know, they don't just bleed together. Like if you just mix them separately and then dumped them right away, it would just kind of bleed all together. So we are going to wait, but we're not going to wait until like the pouring temperature that I'm shooting for, just before that. So just a couple notes on the pour before we get rolling here. Who else is here? Watermelon is a good color. I liked it. I was like, wow, I kind of like that one. That's what spurred this all on. Playing with the pinks. I wasn't super thrilled. I wanted to see if I could kind of change the pink that we made before a little bit or try something different. And that just kind of came about. And I was like, wow, I like that one. Let's see here. So so what we're doing is, and just to let you know, this is the P-Town Subby, the Beast, they call it. And these take about 45, on the website, the P-Town website, they say that each tube takes about 45 grams. Now I'm going to I'm going to add more to that total because what I'm doing is I'm mixing it all in one cup and then I'm going to dump it off. Well, some of it's going to remain in this mixing cup. And I also do like to be a little bit over what they recommend. You know, I can pour the rest off into my little, you know, little faux burl mold, which actually reminds me, I've got, I think, 2 boxes ready to go for the little faux burls. If anybody's interested, I'll put a link in a second after I get done pouring this. So like not the molds, but the actual, my excess pours, you know, where you can recast them in a PVC pipe. You get a box of, I think it's 10 of them. I'll have to double check on that. It's like $1 a piece for those things. If you're into handles and, you know, stoppers with some interesting mixtures of colors. All right, so what I factored for this was I'm going to mix up about 560 grams total in this cup. We're going to end up with about 185 per, you know, that's what I'm going to put in these 3 cups though. So there's a little room for excess there. So we need 280 times 2. My arm hurts for some reason. I'm telling you, getting old, guys. Not for me. All right, so I'm a little over, no big deal. 281. And as your shop heats up, you'll notice that your resins tend to get thinner if you're just leaving them out in the shop. So just, you know, and that's where the temperature difference kind of, you know, why you kind of need to adjust things if you're trying to go for the exact same, you know, effects or results in your pours. Because you're starting with the resin thinner, it ends up, what happens is you need to wait till a higher temperature for it to kind of get to the thickness that you would have been pouring at if it was cooler in your shop. And the thing is, there's also even like a little bit of a difference, you know, if it just spikes one day, a lot of times the resin, for some reason, it hasn't in the jug all heated up. But if it's, you know, consistently for a day or two warmer than it was, then you start getting those effects where it's thinner in the jug and it starts out thinner, which means you need to kind of wait a little bit longer for it to get a little bit thicker. Basically what I'm saying is if it's cooler temperature, if you're starting cooler, at the same temperature, the cooler resin is going to be thicker at the same temperature as the thinner resin that's, you know, started out thinner at that same temperature. It just tends to be a little thinner, I find. I don't fully understand it. It should, I think it should just be the same, but it doesn't work that way. All right, so we need 181. What did I pour? 281. I got to quit talking while I'm doing this. I'm going to double check my... This is one bad thing. If you reuse your mixing cups, you can't just put another mixing cup on there. Yeah, okay, so we're at 2... I'm just going to zero that out. That's about the same. Okay, so we were probably at about 281. I wanted to make sure I wasn't at 181. All right, 281, maybe a little bit more than that with the part B. And what you'll find is as the temperature warms in your shop, you're going to have less working time. It also does heat up a little bit faster. I'm going to go to like 282 with the part B. I usually put a little extra part B in. And again, I don't recommend that for typically, but with Alumilite Clear Slow, which is what I'm using, that seems to work. I just like it. And there's no adverse effects doing, you know, adding 1 more gram with the part B. Now, if you're using any other resin, any epoxy or, you know, other Alumilite products, don't do that. Make it as even as possible. You're always going for as, you know, keep those ratios good, and then that way, that's not going to be the cause of problems. That's like the main thing. If you can follow the you know, stir it real well, get all that stuff. If you know you stirred it well, you know you mixed it right proportions and all that stuff, then if you do run into problems, you can kind of eliminate those problems. Another one that's an easy one to eliminate as a problem is make sure you got a filter on your airline, because water in your pressure pot, if you got moisture in your airline and it gets into your pressure pot with the blanks in there, especially if it's a urethane resin like Alumilite Clear Slow, that can cause issues with your curing and all that stuff. So just put a filter on your line, and then you don't have, then that's another thing that if something goes wrong, you're not like, well, was there moisture? It's also a good idea just to try, every once in a while drain, use that drain plug on your compressor to get rid of any moisture that may be in your compressor periodically, especially if you're in a humid area. We don't have as much problem with that kind of stuff here, but I still do it because I don't want to be, if you're troubleshooting something and you don't know if you mixed it right, or it could be anything basically at that point. All right, so we're going to put in we got 185 grams of resin. I'm loading these up. I could probably get away with less pigment possibly, but I'm kind of finding that the more pigment you put in, the less bleeding you get. And it's not even bleeding, actually. That's not even really the right term. I'll explain it after we get done pouring. What I've kind of found with this stuff. Went a little over. That's not a big deal. Like I said, I'm finding that it's, depending on what you're going for, more can be better. May not be necessary, but generally not going to hurt anything either. Up to a point. There's limits, and that's actually a test that I need to do with this pigment that I'm going to come out with. I need to try to destroy some blanks, putting too much pigment in. What is the upper limit? So that'll be kind of a fun experiment to see at what point is too much pigment too much. I can give you a general guideline right now. For most liquid pigments, generally you don't want to be putting, you should be safe in most cases. You'll have to look at the directions for different pigments and all that stuff. But typically with these liquid pigments, whatever brand they are, you kind of want to stay under 5% usually. By weight, I think is the best. It'd be hard to do a volumetric measurement that way. But 5%. So if you got 100 grams, you want to stay under 5. 100 grams of resin, 5 grams of pigment. I think this is the same, 7.4. Like I said, I'm kind of loading these up. I don't think that this is totally necessary, but I'm pouring 12 blanks. I don't want to find out that it was too little. That's something. It's better to pour a few blanks. Try, like if you're trying to figure out the perfect amount of pigment or whatever that you want to put in, pour a few, try it out and see where how it comes out. Do a test to see how opaque or whatever you're going for, how much it bleeds. Then once you've gotten that dialed in, then do the big pour. And 185 here. I don't know if we're going to get to 185 on this one. Kind of poured a little bit over on those other two on accident. So we're going to call it 181 is good. Not a big deal. Get these things out of the way. Get one more. I got one more of these little metal ones. And I'm going to look at this interference powder cup. Once I get it good and mixed in, kind of see, I think that's probably going to be good. I'm looking for something that's, pretty much opaque, because we're going to be, anytime you have to tube a blank, that's the one thing with the bespoke blanks or bespoke pens. There's no tubes to hide usually, so you can get away with transparent stuff, but it's kind of a pain if you got to, mess around with the tubes. Painting tubes is fine, that's not a big deal, but yeah, I think that's plenty to have. I still recommend probably painting the tubes. typically. I usually use painted tubes just because I don't want to find out later that I should have painted them. But if you can just go for more opacity in it. And things are heating up really fast in my shop right now. And it's not even that hot. Holy, 103, yeah, we got to go. Too much talky. So I'm just going to give that a little stir. I'm just going to check the temp on this just so I know. Jesus, 112. Yeah, we got to go. You know, thinking back now, what I should have done, ooh, that looks pretty good. On the top at least. I kind of messed up the ratio on this. We got way too much green. Didn't think about that too much. I think it'll work. Did I mix too much resin up? These are going to be cool, I think. But what I wanted was like half green, half pink, right? And I didn't think about it much. I had 2 greens and 1 pink, so technically I should have altered the ratio a little bit. It's not a big deal. I'm not even worried about it, and so what I'm going to do here is and actually the temperature is not bad. So this is why you really need to have a notebook, because I had expectations going into this pour about what temperature I needed to be pouring at, and I mean, this is fine. The pink was at 112, so I got to remember that. The green was probably around 108 or something like that, and like I said, the red heats up faster, right? But this is actually perfect. I don't even know how that worked out that way. This is working pretty well. I'm going, I'm not doing this super fast or anything. I can't believe that worked out so well. Do wish the ratio was a little bit better on those 2 colors, but it's not that big of a deal. I actually really like that green. The way that those 2, the interference with the pigment worked out. I'm gonna just kind of top this off. With these blanks, with these molds, they're shorter than mine. That was the reason that I came out with mine. I wanted a specific length, but so we got our brick. This guy's going in the pressure pot over here. I gotta put the lid down, put that guy in there. That worked out well. All right, get the air. We got the pressure. So let's pour these guys into our, this will be a fun burl right here. We got camo on the bottom, and we're gonna have watermelon on the top. So these fun burls are pretty crazy. I'm just gonna get my sticks wiped off first. Now this is another thing to kind of keep in mind. If you are going to be pouring your excess somewhere, which I got to be honest, there's really no pink left, so we're just pouring some green in here. Pretty thick stuff at this point, but it should be okay. So that's another point that I want to make, though. You know, with these temperatures, you know, with the temperature warming up in your shop, and depending on what you're trying to, you know, how you're pouring things, what are you doing, how many blanks, how are you pouring it, what temperature, you know, are you starting the pour at. In some cases, you may not really have time for doing like excess pouring. Like it may be pretty much too thick to be pouring excess after the fact. So, you know, be kind of cognizant of that when you're planning stuff, because if you're going to make a lot more, you know, a lot of excess because you wanted to pour some extra, some over pour stuff, you know, you may find that you just don't really have enough time as temperatures kind of start heating up in the shop, which is something that I'm kind of finding. There's been a number of times where I'm like, nope, we missed it. It's over, you know, kind of thing. A lot of times with mica powders, I don't pour at the same as high a temperature. You can really, there's like two things going on with that. So liquid pigments versus mica powders. Mica powders, especially if you're putting quite a bit in to make it more opaque, they're thickening the resin themselves. They're pretty big chunks of color. And so you just end up with a thicker resin in the cup at the same temperature as if you had poured liquid pigment in. So liquid pigment's a thinner, you know, viscosity material in general. And, you know, so you can get away with more, and micas just don't tend to bleed a whole lot. And I wanted to mention, like I was talking about bleeding, so I was adding more pigment. I was like, I'm going to load it up in these things. And what I've actually found is it's not actually color bleed a lot of times. I mean, if you're waiting till the end of the you know, it's warm and thick, you know, end of the working time kind of thing, what's happening is it's not bleeding. Like those two colors are not truly like bleeding together as if, you know, you just mixed up two cups and then dumped them immediately. At that point, it's like bleeding together. It's commingling right away. What I realized, I guess is what I should say, what I realized is happening is you've got like two colors, right? And if there's like a thin amount of it stacked, what ends up happening is then it's see-through, right? So that's why I was saying that adding more pigment to your cup limits the like color bleed effect. And it's just because when the resin itself gets really thin, you know, and you haven't really put a whole lot of pigment in, then you can see through it. And so if you've got, you know, our two most hated colors together, blue and yellow, the yellow is super transparent at that point, and you can see the blue behind it is what's actually happening. And what happens is as the light waves are coming back through those layers, you're seeing green. Technically, the two colors didn't really totally like bleed together. It's just they're so thin and the light is transferring through the yellow that you see green. So a lot of times, and in some cases, there's no way around it. I'm just going to be completely honest. You can't get out of, you know, this color bleed thing. Things tend to bleed together. You don't have enough time, whatever the case may be. However, I want to show you guys something. We are going to be reintroducing the Michigan blank. And you might see there's some lighter areas, right, where it feels like it might be kind of greenish, like down here. But the truth is, you know, looking at this, it doesn't look green. It's like lighter bluish. And what I did here was I just loaded up a ton of the yellow mica, and I went with mica. So far, I really haven't found enough. I haven't been able to put enough yellow pigment, and this is the other issue. Yellow is just what I've found, like no matter, and I've tried a ton of different pigments, like brands of liquid pigments. Yellow tends to just be very light, like thin. Like it's not strong, right? So I have a feeling that there's just, you can't add enough yellow to put like blue liquid pigment with like a navy blue like the darker blues. I think you're going to run into problems where it's just, you can't get it to not look green. I haven't been able to yet. Now, I'm going to be doing some testings to find the upper limit of how much pigment you can actually put in these things. So maybe I'll find a point where liquid pigment works. But if you're going for something and you don't want color bleed, just go with a mica powder and add a lot of it. But these are good enough in my case. Like I said, there are areas where it kind of looks a little green. I'm looking at my camera, my screen, and it looks on screen like there's maybe a little bit of kind of green going on. But in person here, what it just looks like is a lighter blue. Like green is not popping out in my eyes on these blanks. And I'm the first person, like I just refused to make Michigan blanks because there was green in them. So I ended up just taking them off. This blank in person is fine to my eyes. Good enough to the point where I'm going to reintroduce these once I swap to the round blanks for team colors. So just, a couple little random thoughts, things that I've kind of found over the course of, honestly, over the course of playing with these pigments and doing stuff. I have poured a billion test batches of blanks and, things that I found. Now, there are certain pigments that you really don't need to put a ton in. They just don't tend to bleed together. They're dark enough to where it's not like it's going to be an issue. So, you may have to just kind of play around. That's why I was saying, don't pour 12 blanks. People always do this. Like they're like, I'm going to get into resin casting and I'm going to pour a 50-gallon, table first try, things like that. Try things out on smaller, do like a single, it's always good to have PVC pipes on hand, even if you've got silicone molds. It's not a bad idea to have some PVC pipes on hand just so you can do single things. You could pour just in one thing on a silicone mold, but I find it just easier just to have some PVC pipes if you're doing a test or something like that. And just see, pour your stuff together, go turn a blank. What I do, so these are the samples that I make to see what the colors look like. And it's very simple. You just basically, if you got a collet chuck, even if you have just a 4-jaw chuck, you could put it between centers if you want. It would be a little bit wobbly. It's best to, if you have a collet chuck, to just grab it in the jaws there. Make sure you got tailstock support and then just, turn it down. But what I recommend is also grab a drill and try to figure out, whatever that end diameter is, try to figure out like how much resin is left on a cigar or whatever type of pen kit you usually use, and then drill out, the end of this blank. And what you can do is you can kind of see, you can even stick a tube in there and see, can I see the tube? So you can kind of adjust and figure out what opacity you need to do. But it's not a bad idea if you're doing tests like this to see, just turn some stuff back and see, did it bleed? Do I need to, adjust things, up the temperature? It's much better to figure that out one blank at a time. Than pouring like 12, even 6. It's just a waste of resin if you didn't hit the mark. So my only issue is I don't typically do that. I'd rather test things the way that I'm going to pour them sometimes. So that may factor into your decision, but I don't think that if you're just trying to kind of do a little experiment, one at a time is a much better way to go, and you're not going to waste as much time or resin. So, yeah, mica's good, because it's funny. We did the burgundy. I was reading Robin's question, or note to self: add more mica. There's really no upper limit to how much mica you can put in. So I was talking about, if you're doing liquid pigments, these, the dyes, the divine pigments, Alumilite dyes, the pigment paste. And then once mine come out, all these things, if it's a liquid, like a dye is kind of how I think, like a liquid pigment, there is an upper limit. And the reason for that is to make it liquid, that's a chemical. That's some sort of a liquid chemical stuff that they're mixing dry pigment with, as far as I understand. They got to put the color in, but you got to make it liquid somehow, right? And so the problem is there's this liquid chemical that you're adding into your resin. there's only so much of that you can put in there before it starts messing up the chemistry with your actual resin itself, right? So there's an upper limit with liquid pigments. With mica powders, I mean, you could literally put the same amount of volume in there. It's not gonna do anything there's no chemicals reacting. There's nothing that's gonna really inhibit the cure of your resin, right? So don't worry about it with mica powders, but with these liquid things, you got to watch out how much you're putting in. Alcohol ink would be another one. That's actually even worse. I would say you really don't want to put too much of that alcohol ink in, because alcohol definitely will affect the chemistry. So let's see. Let me scroll up. One thing that I wanted to do. So we're going to, whoa, navy blue took over, guys. I think. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, I guess it does tell me like the percentages. So, but you only got one vote. New colors. Navy blue took the top. Kelly green in second. Burgundy and watermelon. So, but fairly evenly split. You guys kind of like them all. I'm really leaning towards the navy blue as being one of them. Like I said, I really feel like that's a useful color for people to use. There's so many things that, especially if you're doing like a team color, there's a lot of dark blue team colors. But I think navy blue is a good one. So that one's kind of, I'm really leaning towards that. Kelly green, huh? Like I said, Kelly green for me is a little bit lower on the list, because army green, like I already have a green coming out, and this is just the first round. Okay, so just to let you know, we'll have to kind of see how everything goes. I'll be coming out with more down the road, as long as this doesn't completely blow up in my face and turn into, like a losing money type of deal. But yeah, navy blue. All right, cool. So let me let's see here. Half watermelon, half green. And the other half green, yeah. That's funny. Yeah, I know, watermelons are more red than green. Let's see, Randy asked, when you paint a tube, so what I was gonna do, hold on real quick. I'm gonna put up, so how does this work? Oh, Q&A. That doesn't work. So what I was going to do, because we only did one pour, if you guys have questions, let's do, I can do like, we'll just go until it's 1 o'clock my time. 5 more minutes. If you guys have questions, ask away. I'll hang out here. Like I said, it was nice because I wanted to do the 12 blank mold this time. And but I do have some stuff, with the bottling that I need to get done in the shop, and I'm losing tomorrow for Mother's Day in the shop. So let's see. So let me scroll back up, and there was a question. Where was it? Hold on a minute. Let me scroll up to the. Randy asked, when you paint a tube, do you need to drill your hole a tad larger? No, I don't usually. If you're using a really, really thick paint, or you put on a lot of coats, like one thing where that was a problem. Well, okay, so painting tubes, no, I typically don't. One easy way, if you've got more money than time or patience, which is both for me, one easy thing you can do. Turner's Warehouse, depends on what you're going for, but you can just get powder coated tubes from Turner's Warehouse. They got white, black, and maybe even like a gray silver kind of thing. There are even nickel plated tubes that you can get. So you can get pre-painted ones. That's what I do a lot of times, but you're kind of limited to pretty much like Sierra style, like the Wall Street, Gatsby, any of those. Cigars and like junior whatever variants. So that's an easy way. I don't have to think about it. But what I do is I just spray paint them, and spray paint's so thin, you don't need to glob a lot on a tube. Just, line them up on like a hanger or something like that, and just, give them a couple squirts and you're good to go. So that's such a thin layer, you don't even have to think about it with the drill bit. Where you may run into problems is if you're painting the inside of the blank itself. For something that is totally transparent, I would recommend doing that, because the problem is you can paint the tube in that instance, but you're still going to see glue splotches. It just doesn't look pretty. So you're better off painting the inside of the blank. Now the problem is if you get like, like the little acrylic paint pot, or if you're using acrylic paint, a lot of times people just get those little paint pot things. That's really thick, and that's going to add generally a significant amount of, material in the hole. You may have to kind of mess around with like a slightly different drill hole. The easiest way to go, I just spray paint the inside. It's a waste of spray paint, I will be honest. But you can just spray it. Another way to go with the spray paint, I forgot, I haven't done this for a while. The other way to go is like grab, just like a cup, paper cup, whatever it may be, disposable, of course. Take your spray can, spray a bunch in the bottom, and then just grab a Q-tip or something, or even a paintbrush, and then you can actually paint on the spray paint. And again, spray paint's so thin that you don't really have to worry about that. Do thin coats. You should typically be able to get, everything covered by doing 2 thin coats. And so spray paint is super thin, so that's a good one, and it also generally sticks fairly well to like plastics. The other one is like model paint. That's not a bad one, and it's usually pretty thin and kind of sticks to the plastic pretty well. So there's all I know about painting tubes and stuff. Let's see here. There's Randy's question. So let me scroll down. I know there was a couple other ones. Jim's asking, let's see here. Oh, okay. 2 seasons, 1 turning season, 1 not turning. So Jim was asking, what temp do you pour your zebra blanks? It depends. All of these things depend on what's going on in my shop. So I don't really have an answer to that. It's not that high. I mean, it's not like I wait until it's 150 degrees, but it does depend on what the temperature in my shop is. So, let's see, Michael McEwen is asking, have you even used the tubes from Easywood Tools as a mold? Yeah, you can use those as a mold too. They work okay. They're usually, I think, kind of a limited lifespan. I remember back in the day, there was somebody that actually had like a full-on system. They had like a rack like this with, like a bunch of holes in it, and they sold the tubes, and it was like this whole like kind of crazy system that you had to buy into. But the problem was those things lasted a lot less. Like they just didn't hold up to the heat, because the problem is all these resins generate heat and are like wear on the material a little bit. And so you had to replace them all the time. But like in a pinch, I've actually definitely used those things for one-off type things. I'll just cut that tube. So that's a good material. It works great. And even if it stuck, just cut it off. It's not, particularly expensive or whatever. But I think over time it would get kind of expensive if that's all you were using and you're doing a lot of blanks. PVC is generally a little bit better than that. But even PVC warps and stuff. The heat from the resin warps that stuff too. So let's see here. Scrolling up. Any other questions? Joseph needs a burnt orange. I'll write that down. David asked, did I ever find metal tubes? Yeah, they're expensive. Like it's kind of a pain so far for me. I think you could get some. So here's like the biggest problem that I have. What I would really love to do is get like the one big advantage that I don't know. Okay, so we got PVC pipes, right? What I really kind of like about PVC pipes is it's a 13/16 hole, which I think is a little bit more advantageous. I like that. However, as the hole grows, there's more room for the resins to kind of move around. And so like the bigger the hole, the more it's going to move around and the more bleed and issues you get. So 3/4 inch pipe, holes are kind of the best in that scenario. And the other advantage to 3/4 is it's a lot easier to find a 3/4 inch collet than it is a 13/16 collet. Like that's something you're going to have to kind of special order. So like I have mixed feelings, but what I would love is to find metal pipes that are 13/16, or at least have that option if I wanted it. And there is no such thing that I've found. I can go to 7/8. That's getting a little bit big and I don't love that, but 3/4 3/4 is available. The problem that I have with them though is they get a little bit more expensive if you're looking for something that's polished on the inside. I would want them to be pretty much polished. Like I want the outside of the blank to look pretty decent instead of just all, mangled up kind of looking. So that's kind of, and it just gets expensive. Like if I was going to replace and have enough to pour as many, blanks as I have molds, I mean, it'd be hundreds of dollars. Like it would be a significant investment for me. So I just haven't pulled the trigger or found anything. I think if somebody actually came out with them, they were totally polished, they had the plugs, it was a package deal, here's 10 of them for, whatever dollar amount, I would probably pull the trigger. But in some cases, you may actually have to buy a hone and like hone them yourself and do all this stuff. You may be able to save more money doing that. It kind of gets a little expensive. If you want to look into it, McMaster Carr, I believe, had reasonable priced pipes. I actually found some that supposedly were polished on the inside on Amazon even. So it's out there. It's out there. But I don't think galvanized pipe. You want steel. And I'm not an expert. I'm just kind of guessing. Maybe you could go with even aluminum. That might even save some money. And again, the advantage to metal pipes is, as far as I can tell, like you're never going to have to replace them. That is the one advantage, So I can argue, I was making that argument. Oh, it's hundreds of dollars. Well, all right. These molds are, $50 to $100 each, depending on, which one you're buying. So silicone molds, they get pretty expensive and they wear out, pretty within probably, I don't know. Depends on how many batches you pour through, what resin you're using and all that stuff, but they wear out, right? Now I've gotten through, I think my first ones that I made of those Gatling molds, I think it was probably 2 years before I actually said, okay, this thing needs to go in the garbage because it's just, they're sticking and it's not working right. And I pour quite a few blanks, and I didn't have like a lot of them. At the most I had like 4 and I really used 2 of them the most. So there's advantages, but there's disadvantages. Like I said, I think if somebody just came out with a set that here's some 3/4 inch pipes, they're so long, whatever, you can keep them forever. They come with the plugs and all that kind of stuff. I would probably pull the trigger on it and at least try it, try like a set. But I don't want to have to like hone them, and I don't really want to spend the money and do all this stuff right now, at least. The pigment thing is taking over all of my my entire life. So down the road, and I do know there are some people that I know are using them. I just haven't really talked to anybody about it. So there might be some. If I do talk to somebody and they're some of the casters out there, they're kind of like, I don't really want to tell you my secrets or how I do things. So depending on how forthcoming people are with sharing information with me, I might find better options, cheaper, easier, whatever, or a good place to buy them. Again, another thing that I'm not sure about, but like aluminum pipe versus steel pipe, I don't know if there's I don't really know how much the cost is between them and all that kind of stuff, but that would be interesting to find out if there's like a difference between those, if you really need to go with one over the other for some reason. But you also, if something gets stuck in a metal pipe, you're not going to destroy the metal pipe. You will be able to get it out somehow. And obviously you're probably not going to be cutting it off. So that may be a little bit I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing if it gets stuck in there, but they work the same as, PVC. PVC pipes, like I was saying, they wear out too. Even if you spray them every single time and do all that stuff, especially if you're using like epoxies tend to get hotter and they tend to wear on these mold materials. Doesn't matter which one it is, if it's HDPE, if it's silicone, if it's PVC, I would imagine even metal possibly. Epoxies are pretty hard on molds, so you'll have to, if that's what you're using, you're gonna have to replace things more often typically. But with PVC pipes, some of these resins can get hot enough to where it warps the PVC pipe itself, actually. That is one advantage also to Alumilite Clear Slow. Specifically, I know there's no label, but I just ended up buying some gallon jugs because I kind of have like 2 sets that I swap out. Here's the label, just to make sure. Because there's lots of different things that sound the same. So Clear Slow. It's a urethane. Urethane resins are typically not as hard on molds and stuff like that. So that's another reason why I really like using this versus epoxy. Your molds will last longer with it typically. But with the Clear Slow, the slow version of this specifically, it doesn't get as hot. It doesn't reach as high a temperature as even just the regular clear version of this stuff. And so if it's not getting as hot, you're not going to, potentially bend or warp PVC. But just know if you've got, 6 or 10 or 12 or, whatever, you got like your set of PVC pipes, like eventually with enough use, even if you, and you have to spray them every single time with a mold release agent, otherwise they'll just get stuck in there. But, even if you spray them every single time, eventually that surface degrades and it gets stickier, and sometimes the pipes themselves literally will like warp from the heat. So, all right, well, I don't see any more questions. Let me know if I missed any questions real quick. I think I went over what said I was going to do. That's okay. I'm chatty. I don't think I missed any questions. David's got one. What's the best way to store Clear Slow in the summer? You can put it in the, depending on how low your refrigerator's going, probably it's like 40 degrees. That should be fine. Realistically, if you can just bring it into an air-conditioned house, that's fine. If you've got a space that, I don't know how, like if my shop was in the garage at home, I don't know how much Gretchen would really like me bringing resin into the house necessarily. But I mean, as long as you got a spot, put it in a box or something so it's kind of contained if for some reason something spilled. If you could just bring it into an air-conditioned house, that's fine. Storing it at room temperature is what I recommend typically. In the summer though, if you are working with it in the shop, you see that I've got this, I bought a freezer chest. Now it's not a freezer, it's not at freezing temperatures. I've also got a regulator back here. It's called Ink Bird is the brand, and it works great. Let me see if I can find this thing. I'm going to drop a link to this if anybody, especially like the folks that are in like Vegas. I think this could really be helpful if anywhere, I guess, honestly. Or Phoenix and Vegas. Let me look for that Ink Bird thing. I mean, for any reason, it's actually, even for like your oven, for doing the blend, and I have one on my oven for doing like stabilizing or for my molds. It keeps things, you can set it to where it won't go up and down as much. It kind of keeps things where they're supposed to be. Yeah, here's one. Is it? There's other ones also. How much is this? That's weird. Not giving me a way to purchase this. I think this is the same one. Here we go. Here's a link. So like I said, it's a temperature controller. And the way it works is you plug in your oven or whatever it may be into one plug. Where a lot of people use these things is actually for like brewing stuff. And so they'll actually have a thing where it's like a cooler as well as a heater. So you can plug both of those in and it'll regulate your temperature if you've got a cooling system of some sort, which I don't do all that. But it'll regulate the temperature like really close. I only use it for like one way. So you plug your appliance in, it's got a temperature probe that you put in the appliance itself. So it's got a better temperature regulator kind of thing. and it's digital, so it will turn things on and off and try to keep that temperature regulated a little bit better than a lot of the things like the toaster ovens. Like they go crazy. Like the range is wild how high things get, and even possibly for refrigerators. But the refrigerator I leave at like 50, I guess 55. I might even actually drop that down a little bit. But I keep it set it to 55 in my shop, and that has allowed me to cast in the summer. I don't actually chill my clear slow typically. I leave that out, and I just, it's okay. But where literally, there's no way I could cast stuff. It was when I was, I still do, but for the team color blanks using Alumilite white, there would be no way in the summer that I could even use it. So refrigerator could work. I don't know if you need to do that. For anybody another one, actually, the reason that I bought this originally was for cactus juice, because cactus juice can actually just set up, like cure, in the bottle if it gets to like 85 degrees. So that's why I actually bought that, was to store the cactus juice in the summer so that I didn't, because I've actually had a jug of cactus juice cure on me in the jug, just sitting in the shop. So I bought it for that, but the Alumilite white also I also keep my CA glues and different stuff like that in there. It'll give you a little bit longer shelf life. So let's see here. Otter's Ranch, that's cool. Well, have a good trip up there. That'll be awesome. Spring Blossom Festival. Sweet. That'll be awesome. Yeah, pretty short. I mean, now that I'm talking, we're approaching not as short as it was just to pour the first one, but anyway, all right, cool, guys. So one other link that I'll drop for anybody and I'll put a link in the description also. But I've got and I might need to look and see how many I actually have put in inventory, but I'm pretty sure that I've got 2, maybe even 3 of the faux burl packs. So, like the actual faux burls that my overpours. The excess resin that I dump into that little faux burl mold. So what it is it's let me just 10. So it's 10 of these guys for $10 basically. And so what you would do is you can recast them in a 1.5 inch PVC pipe, put clear or do whatever you want, but you get these interesting crazy colors of random blanks. A lot of them are lately, a lot of them are like the team color testing that I'm doing for switching over to the vertical pour system for, and the new pigments. So you might get a lot of looks at some random pigments and team color blanks that are coming. But for all my blanks that I pour and everything we do on the stream, I just do the over pour in that little faux burl mold. And so if it's something that you're interested in, 10 of them for $10. And I've got 2 boxes. Yeah, I've got 2. I know I've got 2 in inventory. Actually, I've got a 3rd one ready. I just need to add it to inventory. So if anybody's interested in that, those are available on my website. And I think that's about it, guys. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these things. That I gotta be, man, I don't know if you guys saw it, but the green looked wicked. Like, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. Just what I was seeing. Like, I didn't really look down in or anything, but the excess, the drippings on the top of the mold, that green was like killer. It was interesting. I don't know. So I'm interested to see how these turn out. Like I said, totally didn't think about how much red was going in there. I wasn't going for like more red than green like you would normally see in like a watermelon slice. That wasn't the thing, but I kind of was going for half and half. I didn't really think that half red green and half interference green. Yep, I kind of messed that up. But anyway, so all right, guys. So have a great rest of the weekend for all those mothers out there. Have a happy Mother's Day, and yeah, We'll be back next week. We'll turn up these, at least one of these blanks, and see how these things look. And so these watermelon blanks will be going in the pen blank club box, as well as one of the blanks from the last one, either the burgundy, gold, and navy blue ones, or the coral, robin egg, and black. So kind of a half and half on those ones, and then definitely a watermelon blank. So should be pretty fun. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining the fun today. Like I said, a little bit shorter today, but I do have a few things that I need to get done in the shop, and hopefully we'll get just one step closer, or maybe a couple steps closer, to getting these new liquid pigments finally rolled out and ready to go so you can order them. I'm probably going to do like a pre-order type deal once I feel like I'm like, okay, we're ready. I might actually do like a pre-order so that folks that want to make sure you get the first one. I don't know if I'm going to sell out. I don't necessarily expect that, but I may be a little bit short on my personal inventory because most of the product is probably going to be going to Turner's warehouse because they got to buy a bunch to get on the shelves up front. So I'll probably be doing like a little bit of a pre-order sale kind of thing so that you can get in the system and make sure you get it first. So just something to keep in mind. But we're still probably, unfortunately, if I'm being realistic, we're probably still like about a month away before I'm actually, like, they're going out the door. But we're close, very close. I just got to make sure a couple things are ready to go, get my labels, and then bottle it up. So anyway, guys, have a great